Today, we're digging into a really intense period back in 2025. It's when President Trump significantly altered the trade landscape with Canada and Mexico. The administration's argument, based on our sources, was pretty clear. America needed decisive action. They felt that national security and prosperity had to come first. The view presented was that, for too long, open borders were letting in, quote, a relentless flow of illegal immigration and deadly fentanyl.
Right. Overwhelming communities, causing real harm.
Exactly. And this perspective framed it as, America standing at a crossroads. It was about demand and accountability, getting neighbors to secure borders, stop the drugs, stop illegal entry. Welcome to the deep dive. We've got a pile of sources you send over: White House statements, economic reports, news articles, even polling data. Our job today, cut through it all, pull out the key pieces, and give you the shortcut to understanding this pretty major 2025 trade conflict.
Yeah, and what's really striking here is this wasn't just about dollars and cents, or trade deficits on a page. It's this complex mix of economic moves, serious national security claims, and, intense international diplomacy playing out almost day by day.
So we'll look at why they said they did it, what actually happened, the impacts.
And some of the counter-arguments that pop up when you look closer at the data. It gets complicated fast.
Okay, so let's get into it. What does it all mean for North America, the global economy, and, for you trying to follow along? Let's unpack it. It really kicks off February 1st, 2025. That's the date President Trump signs these executive orders.
Okay.
And they were sweeping near universal 25% tariffs on most imports from Mexico and Canada.
Right, though Canadian oil and energy got a slightly lower rate, 10%. Still significant, but different.
And the legal basis for this was unusual, wasn't it?
Very. He invoked IEEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. That was really a first for using tariffs this way. Usually it's for sanctions, things like that.
Not trade disputes with neighbors.
Exactly. He explicitly cited, and this is key, a sustained influx of illicit opioids and other drugs and illegal aliens as the national emergency justifying it. The stated aims were, cut the trade deficit, force border action, and boost U.S. manufacturing.
And he even floated that idea about Canada.
Oh, yeah. The annexation comment suggested Canada would be much better off joining the U.S. to avoid the tariffs. That definitely raised eyebrows, to say the least.
I bet. So you've got these huge tariffs looming. How did Ottawa and Mexico City react? Must have been immediate.
Swift and strong. Both announced retaliatory measures almost right away. Prime Minister Trudeau in Canada pledged 25% tariffs on about $20 billion worth of American goods immediately.
Wow.
And threatened to ramp that up massively to over 150 billion Canadian dollars if the U.S. didn't back down. Mexico's President Sheinbaum also stated very clearly Mexico would hit back with its own tariffs and, interestingly, non-tariff measures too.
So no blinking from either side initially?
No. It set a very confrontational tone right from the start.
Now, you mentioned the justification. A big part of it, maybe the central part from the White House perspective, was fentanyl coming across the northern border.
That's right. The official statements were quite direct. They said Canada played a central role. They even mentioned robust super labs out in Western Canada.
And they used seizure data to back that up.
They did. They pointed to fentanyl seizures at the U.S.-Canada border for that fiscal year, claiming they were higher than the previous 3 years combined. And they put out this number: the amount seized could kill over 16 million Americans. It's a very stark picture they painted.
Okay, a central role, super labs, rising seizures. But what do other sources say? Does that picture hold up?
Well, this is where you see a major disagreement. Canadian officials, both Trudeau and later Prime Minister Mark Carney, consistently pushed back hard on this, their number. Canada accounts for maybe 1% of the fentanyl coming into the U.S., just 1%.
1% versus a central role. That's a huge difference.
It is. They argue the vast majority, like 97, 98%, comes from Mexico, often made with chemicals from China. And they also point out that a lot of the fentanyl actually produced in Canada stays in Canada for domestic use.
So if Canada's contribution to the U.S. fentanyl problem is potentially that small, does targeting them with tariffs even make sense from a drug control perspective?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it leads to this really interesting and frankly quite worrying economic argument from Stan Voiger.
An economist, right?
Yeah. He looked at the potential unintended consequences. His argument is that these tariffs, by strengthening the U.S. dollar relative to other currencies.
Okay, standard economic effect of tariffs sometimes.
Right. But that stronger dollar could actually make smuggled fentanyl cheaper in U.S. dollar terms, because it's often priced in other currencies initially, or the inputs are.
So cheaper fentanyl could mean
higher consumption, more overdoses, the exact opposite of the policy's stated goal. It's a really stark reminder that economic policies, especially in complex areas like illicit markets, can have effects you don't expect or certainly don't want.
That's sobering. So let's track the timeline. The tariffs were announced Feb 1st, but didn't bite immediately.
There was a brief pause, a 1-month delay, apparently after some initial talks, maybe a sliver of hope. But then, boom, March 4th, they went into effect.
And the pressure kept mounting.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't just the general tariffs. Remember, they also hit steel and aluminum specifically with 25% tariffs back in February, effective March 12th. And then cars and auto parts, another 25%, effective April 3rd. It was like a rolling barrage of economic pressure.
Now, you mentioned negotiations. How did those play out differently for Mexico versus Canada? It sounds like Mexico had some success.
They really did, relatively speaking. President Sheinbaum in Mexico, who was already seen as taking a tougher line on cartels at home, played it very coolly, according to sources. She engaged directly with Trump.
And took concrete actions.
Yes, very concrete. She secured that initial delay partly by sending 10,000 National Guard troops to Mexico's border with the U.S., a big show of force. And then, significantly, Mexico transferred 29 cartel figures, including a major Sinaloa cartel founder, to U.S. custody.
Wow, that's direct cooperation.
Absolutely. And it worked, to an extent. Trump publicly praised her actions. The result: Mexico got exemptions for about 50% of its imports from the tariffs. A major concession won through, well, very direct security cooperation.
Okay, so that was Mexico's path. Canada's story seems different.
Very different. Canada also got that initial 1-month delay. And they made commitments, like appointing a dedicated fentanyl czar to coordinate efforts against the drug.
But the tariffs still hit them.
They did, full force, and the rhetoric was much sharper. Trudeau, who was PM then, called the fentanyl justification bogus. He accused Trump of trying to basically break the Canadian economy, maybe even angling for annexation.
Strong word.
Very. And when Mark Carney took over as prime minister in March, he kept that firm line. He famously told Trump, Canada is not for sale, just drawing a line in the sand on sovereignty.
But the pressure didn't let up from the U.S. side.
Nope. Despite Canada repeating that 1% fentanyl number over and over, the U.S. escalated. In July, President Trump announced he was hiking the tariffs on Canadian goods from 25% up to 35%.
35%.
Effective August 1st. The justification given was, again, lack of cooperation on fentanyl and Canada's own retaliatory tariffs. Carney expressed disappointment, but vowed to protect Canadian jobs and focus even harder on diversifying trade away from the U.S.
So this wasn't just political theater. These tariffs started having real economic bite, didn't they? You mentioned the market reaction earlier.
Oh, immediately. After it was clear on March 3rd that the tariffs were going ahead, U.S. stock markets got hit hard. The S&P 500 fell into correction territory by March 10th. That's what? Over $4 trillion wiped off market value. It was a major shock.
Why such a strong reaction? What were the fears?
Primarily inflation. Tariffs act like taxes on imports. Those costs tend to get passed down the line first to businesses buying materials or components, then to consumers buying finished goods.
Right. Steel, aluminum, car parts. That affects a lot of industries.
Exactly. And consumer goods, too. Plus, you had economists like at Yale's Budget Lab putting out estimates. They figured the tariffs could cost the average American household something like $1,200 a year in lost purchasing power. That gets people's attention.
And energy, too, right? The Canadian oil tariff.
Yeah, that 10% tariff on Canadian oil was a big worry, especially for gas prices. The U.S. Midwest, in particular, relies heavily on Canadian crude. So higher prices at the pump seemed almost certain. Add to that potential price hikes for things like Canadian lumber, fruits, vegetables. It adds up for everyday people.
Okay, so impacts felt in the U.S. What about in Canada and Mexico? Their economies are so tightly linked to ours.
Hugely vulnerable.
Yeah.
For Mexico, experts were throwing around terms like severe recession if the tariffs stuck. Some projected a GDP drop of maybe 4%. That's massive.
Devastating, really.
Yeah. And Canada, maybe even more dependent on U.S. trade, something like 3/4 of their merchandise exports usually come here. Projections there were for a GDP hit of maybe 1.25% to almost 2% long term.
Still a very big deal for their economy.
Absolutely. The Bank of Canada reported seeing immediate effects. Export-heavy sectors took a dive. Businesses pulled back on hiring plans. So for people in Canada and Mexico, it meant the same kind of worries. Higher prices for goods, potential job losses, just general economic pain. It was a North America-wide squeeze.
Beyond the economic numbers, what about the political relationships? Especially U.S.-Canada, often called the closest in the world. This must have caused serious strain.
Oh, enormous strain. You could see it in the polling data from Canada around February 2025. Really stark numbers. 91% of Canadians said they wanted to be less reliant on U.S. trade.
91%.
Yeah, and 68% said their opinion of the U.S. had worsened. Some polling even showed a significant minority starting to view the U.S. as an enemy. That's a dramatic shift.
And did that translate into actions?
It seemed to. We saw reports of a grassroots Buy Canadian movement gaining steam, and a noticeable drop in Canadians traveling to the U.S. for tourism or shopping, potentially costing the U.S. economy billions, maybe $4 billion a year.
So a real cooling of relations felt on both sides of the border.
Definitely. It fueled Canadian nationalism, this sense of needing to stand up for themselves and diversify away from the U.S. And from a global perspective, this whole episode, the imposing tariffs, the negotiations, the partial rollbacks, it just injected massive uncertainty into trade.
Businesses hate uncertainty.
They absolutely do. It makes it really hard to plan investments, manage supply chains. It damaged international confidence in the U.S. as a predictable trade partner. And then you had the WTO, the World Trade Organization, stepping in.
Right, the body that's supposed to regulate this stuff.
Exactly. They ruled that Trump's tariffs violated WTO rules. Canada formally started dispute proceedings. It really highlighted this move away from the multilateral system the U.S. basically built after World War II. It felt like a questioning of that whole framework.
So wrapping this up, we've seen these tariffs launched with justifications around national emergency, fentanyl, immigration.
Right, those are the stated reasons.
They have sent shockwaves across North America, damaging economies, straining alliances, and forcing a big debate about trade itself.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because it pushes back against decades of kind of accepted wisdom about how trade works best. The goals were stated: border security, leverage, help domestic industry. But the results, so much more complex. Market swings, inflation hitting consumers, shifts in how countries view each other, challenges to international rules.
It's definitely not simple. And the situation as we record this is still evolving, isn't it? The negotiations continue, the long-term effects are still playing out.
Absolutely, still very much in flux.
Which leaves us and you with a big question to think about, maybe. Were these disruptive shocks, these tariffs and friction they caused, a necessary, if difficult, step towards a kind of renewed American self-reliance, a reassertion of national interest?
Or are they potentially unraveling a global system that, for all its flaws, largely benefited the U.S. and provided stability? Are we creating more problems, more uncertainty than we're solving?
How will history look back on this period, that balance between national priorities and our interconnected global economy? It's a tough one.
It really is. A fundamental tension that's going to keep shaping things for a long time to come.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you feel better equipped now to think through all the angles of this complex and ongoing trade story.